Welcome, travelers. I'm Josh.
And I'm Lee Wanika. And this is Tabletop Journeys, where we will be your not-so-humble guides on the quest for RPG adventures.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Tabletop Journeys. Very happy to be across the microphone and the video interwebs from dear friend, Mr. Lee Wanika Miller, new but still dear friend, Mr. Michael Ross. Gentlemen, how the hell are you? What's going on in your perspective next of the world?
Things are good. I just got back from the D20 cruise. We've talked a little bit about it. We're going to do a whole episode deep dive, so I won't, get into too much here, but it was a wonderful time. Great vacation just as itself, a good time running games, meeting gamers. The only little bit of stuff I brought back was this really cool D12 acrylic die that's got a little dragon on the inside. So totally impractical to use, but it's a D12 with a dragon, so I count that as a win. So I had a great time.
I have a gigantic D20, like one of the liquid core D20s. And thoroughly impractical. I can never use it for anything. It weighs about 15 pounds and rolling it is like rolling a bowling ball. And there's no table where that's ever okay. Exactly. Right. And so it sits on my shelf as a cool memento, but nothing the least bit practical for any gaming table I have ever been at. So, speaking of not practical at any gaming table I've ever been at, Mr. Lee Wanika Miller, how are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well, but what I heard from both of you was a challenge because I used to bowl quite a lot, actually.
Me too.
And competitively. So I see that as I will find that table and I will roll that D20. Yeah. We'll see what happens. We'll see if we can figure that out. Gamers out there, if you got said table for us, let us know. Let's see what we can put together.
Yeah, do we need to? Are you saying that we need to write an RPG that's specifically for oversized dice, like an AC/DC RPG called Big Dice or something like that?
Big dice make the world go round.
I've got big dice.
Big dice.
You've got big dice.
Big dice.
But I've got the biggest dice of them all.
Exactly.
Oi, Douglas. Oi, Douglas. I'll stop. I love that tune, by the way. What not? This week has been kind of a whirlwind. I had a week, a couple weeks ago, I got back from one convention, been decompressing from that. I ran a fantastic episode of Star Trek Preservations over the weekend. I'm going to do my level best to not give spoilers, but it's been hard. As Josh knows, I've got a whole bunch of things planned, so there'll be some really good info that comes out about that, how we ran that game, some of the techniques that were used in that game. So do pay attention. That episode will air towards the end of this month or next month. It'll be towards the end of next month before that episode airs. Yeah. But it'll be cool, and there's some really nice stuff that goes with that. But right now, I am desperately in hyper prepare mode because I've got a 4-day con, Rising Phoenix, a lot going on there. I've got a bunch of sessions. I'm doing a panel with a friend of the show, Jay Moores of Faye RPG fame, as well as just hanging out and having a good time with fellow gamers and planning to have a raucous good time Saturday evening at the con for the karaoke event.
Nice. That sounds like an awful lot of fun. I know. I can't wait to go ahead and hear how things went at Rising Phoenix when you get back. That'll be I will live vicariously through you for another little while. So.
Can I throw in one more quick thing, which is sort of a plug?
Of course.
We just announced our first official sponsor for a Catacon this year.
Woohoo!
We were selected as one of many, but still Chaosium. This is their 50th anniversary. And as part of their marketing and celebration, they put together a convention support bundle. And it's like $500 worth of Chaosium material that they're sending to us to use however we see fit. Most of it, in our case, will go into our charity raffle, but there'll be some gaps in our game library that we fill in. We might do some like giveaways of certain things to GMs who run Chaosium games, but
Nice.
It's a huge win for a Catacon. We're very excited that our first official sponsor is Chaosium this year.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Awesome.
And anybody out there listening, really seriously think about going to a Catacon beginning of November every year. Have the date for 25 been?
Yes, November 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Yeah. We went there a couple of years ago. It was
you're wearing the shirt.
I know. I just happened to be wearing the shirt tonight. And you know, it's unlikely that I will get to a convention at the beginning of November for the foreseeable future for a variety of reasons. But really, if you are out in if you're interested in going to Dayton, Ohio, the first week of November, a Catacon is an amazing time. So you should definitely check it out. So.
And I know a number of vendors who travel kind of semi-regionally and even into upstate New York, if they're willing to put a few extra miles. I've actually provided a Catacon's contact to them as well. I've been talking it up since I got back from last year about significantly great place to go and game. So, and I may or may not be running a panel with one of them this weekend. So it is something that I will definitely be putting the hard press on. So,
Excellent.
Looking forward to it. I'm excited. I've had the time booked off since you gave us the prospective dates pretty much right after the last one. Yeah. I think you were just airing your retrospectives when you had the prospective dates in place. And I was like, I'm just booking the time now because I will not be told no.
Yeah.
I will not be told no.
Nice. All right. Well, let's get into the meat and potatoes of tonight's episode. So tonight we're doing a state of the table episode. Some news that has been breaking throughout kind of the TTRPG space has kind of been building up for a while. And now that there are kind of a bunch of stories for us to go ahead and talk about, we're going to take some time tonight to go ahead and talk about them. We have a couple of big ones to go ahead and get through. So I'm going to start tonight with the very first one. And this is one that's obviously something that we here on the content creation side on Tabletop Journeys have been watching a lot of, and we've done a lot of coverage over the last few years of the Wizards of the Coast OGL kerfluffle that happened a few years ago and everything like that. So the release of the newest version of the SRD has been something that lots and lots of people have been eagerly anticipating to kind of see what it was going to shake out. And I think after reading through, so it just got released today. So literally I have not read through all 360 pages of the SRD. I have, however, trusted the content that they put out about the things that are different and what's in there, right? So I'm kind of in full honesty, I have not read all 360 pages just yet. I also don't think that reading all 360 pages is necessary, frankly, to be at the end of the day. I think that there are some very interesting things that they've decided to go ahead and do, especially when you consider things that were not in the previous version of the 5th edition SRD. So the previous version of the 5th edition SRD did not have any feats in it. There are now feats in the SRD, which is a big change because that was one of those things that if you were making any sort of backgrounds or any sort of any stat blocks or anything like that, none of the feats were in the original SRD. So that was a big gap. I think the feats that they put in there now are basically the ones that are usable, or kind of like tied to entry level characters and specifically the backgrounds that are in the SRD. But the fact that there are
origin feats.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Plus some other ones, but that's basically kind of where they stayed with that. But the fact that there are feats in the SRD at all is a big change. The fact that there are some new races and some races removed and everything like that, that's just kind of keeping in line with what the 2024 rules are. So I think in terms of like content wise on the SRD, nothing in there that's super surprising or that I think is super revolutionary. It just kind of seems to be in line with the 2025 rule set. I think what is very, very interesting is the way that they are kind of that they're talking about the way that one can use both 5.1, the SRD 5.1 and SRD 5.2, in that they're viewing them as totally separate documents. They are both in Creative Commons. You can use either one to go ahead and write. You can use them both. You just have to kind of say which one you're using or that you're using it and everything like that. It would have been nice to go ahead and get some specific guidance in what verbiage they wanted to go ahead and see there, but leaving it open is totally fine too. But I will say the one thing that was very, very interesting when I was reading through the FAQs, because this was always kind of a pain point for people that were writing D&D centric content, is that they are now being very explicit with the fact that you can reference content which is not in the SRD specifically by name, or as long as you say where it is from. And so like the example that they give you is they give you some examples of like how to go ahead and cite it, right? And so one of them, it says, in practice a citation might look like this: your players step into an alternate reality where reflection appears all around like shattered glass. For some ideas on potential effects of the alternate reality, check out the mirror zone effects listed in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, page 158. So they're giving you license to use any of the 5th edition books that you want, as long as you say, this is a thing that came from this book, and this is the book that it came from, and this is where you can find it. That guidance was never in the original version of either the OGL or the SRD, so there was a lot of confusion. And I think that when we approached that, that's basically the way that we did it, is that we would say, there are references here to other books. Those books are this. We didn't necessarily say what it was that we grabbed from those other books, but we were very explicit about that at the beginning of any of our books that said, we have references to Mordenkainen's and Xanathars and all that sort of stuff. You should read those books too, kind of thing. So I like the fact that they are finally kind of closing that loophole, because they're making it so that we know that we're covered. They're cool with us doing it, and they're giving us some explicit guidance on how to go ahead and do it. To kind of wrap up all of that, put a big bow on it, I think the best thing that I can say about the 5.2 release is that there were no surprises. Everything was kind of exactly what we thought it was going to be, and there was nothing that was revolutionary or problematic that I saw in it. It's Creative Commons. It's going to be Creative Commons forever. They can't take it back now. It's out there. And they've also said that as they release errata and change things, that they will probably go ahead and backfill it into the SRD as things go along. So they're being very upfront about that also. I think that that's a win. This is good. This is what we wanted.
I would absolutely agree, because I remember more than a few conversations about, look, we can't say this. This is what we want people to do. They step through this door. We want them to see this thing. It is not a thing that we created. We created a story that leads to this WotC story.
Yeah.
We wanted to be able to cite them. We wanted to be able to celebrate them in that way, but it was hard to decide where that line was. And we did the best we could with what we had and what little guidance or no guidance there was. The fact that it's going to be specifically stated makes it a lot easier. On the other side, for future content, not even just that situation, the fact that you can lean to, look, there's this table in this book. We think that this is a great place to start. Now we can say, as opposed to creating 40 different things for our own table, maybe we only wanted to add 5 things to make it flavorful for our world. Now that existing table, that existing random chart, or that existing, hey, if you take the random encounter table for environment X in our world, add these things. So instead of rolling a D20, maybe you're rolling 3D10, and we only have to come up with 10
2D12s or something. Yeah.
Or something, or 2D12s, I love the fact that because that's very specifically stated, we can now lean on this great scaffolding that is the world's most popular role-playing game when we want to create for said game. I think it's a big, big win. I think it's a strong point. And I love the fact that there are no surprises. Josh, you took on this topic to kind of research that, in the fleeting moments before air. So I really, really appreciate that you did that, because it had been tough for me to have been able to do it. And quite honestly, great job.
Yeah.
So
I
have
really
a
get
question.
Paul. Yeah.
So yeah, I have never written anything official for D&D to put on any place. I write homebrew for all the time, but it's all just whatever I make up, so no one matters. But I guess my misunderstanding or my confusion on what you said was you mentioned that there are some feats in the SRD, but not all the feats are in the SRD. But then based on the second thing you said, could you then not create like a class or new subclass and say, we suggest you choose one of these 3 feats and list the 3 you think they should take, and just say these are the what is the difference between having access to all the feats and the ability to just say the feat we want you to take for this class exists in this book?
Yeah. That's a really good question. And I'm not sure that I necessarily have a satisfactory answer, actually, because you're right. Like the rules for the feat, the difference is like the rules for the feats are in the SRD. So you can take that rule as it's written and put it into a book. Let's say that you're making a new background, right? Let's say making a custom background, and you want that custom background to get the Savage Attacker feat, right? You can now just say that this background gets Savage Attacker. Here's the rule. It's all right there. You don't need to go ahead and give them another source to go to. But if you instead wanted to give them Lucky, which is not in the SRD, right? Then you need to see exactly that this background comes with the Lucky feat, Player's Handbook, page 325.
Right. So you can use all of them. You just have to attribute some of them to a different book.
Yep.
That makes no sense to me.
I kind of think it does in a weird way. If I'm to put on my hat of prognostication, +2, I think what it comes down to from a publisher standpoint is word count. If somebody else has already written the words and it's commonly known and it's in a book that everybody has, i.e. the Player's Handbook, why do I want to use my precious word space? See the conversation we're going to have at the end of this episode for why page count and word count becomes very critical and a big serious cost. If I'm doing a book of subclasses and I want to have 5 or 6 feats, that's a bunch of paragraphs. There's probably a bunch of art that has to go with them if I'm going to do the feats. That could be multiple pages of information that I need to do that I would now have to do if I am writing out these things. If I'm not using the origin feeds and I can just cite the book it's from, and I'm legally allowed to do that and morally allowed to do that, that saves me a lot of space. And quite honestly, potentially saves the purchaser a lot of money because now they're not paying for something they've already paid for. I cite the page, I give the title, and I'm good to go. We never had that freedom before. There was a lot of, look, mechanics and rules are technically not able to be copyrighted or whatever the case may be. So, can we give the basics of a feat and rename it, maybe throw in a little something extra, take in a little something more? There's a lot of design space around how can I give this theme and change it enough so it's not the same thing. Yeah. And then again, I'm back to I have to use the words to do that. Yeah. So eliminating that does streamline the design process quite a bit. So unless I'm doing something that's utterly brand new, that's 100% all me, that space I don't got to worry about. That's effort I don't have to put in. And I think that's a big win. Yeah. From their perspective, I think what they're doing is we get raked over the coals every time we go to the mats and legally defend some of these little lawsuits to every little guy who's out there doing it. If they're going to cite us and list us as the source and they're not able to put in the rules, that's free advertising. Might as well. I think that's really the landscape. People were finding other ways to do it anyway, and it was difficult for them, and everybody hated WotC because they had to.
Mm. Well, and I'm going to go ahead and take that a step further because I think that you're exactly right, Michael. It's like if I say Savage Attacker and I don't have to go ahead and say anything additional. But if I say Lucky, I have to say it comes from the Player's Handbook, right? That's basically the difference that we're talking about. But if you think about a site like 5e Tools, right, which basically in a digital form replicates every book that D&D puts out constantly, like that is I don't think that I am spilling any great secret when I say that there's a tremendous amount of content on 5etools.com, and I use it all the time. And I have always sort of wondered, how do they skirt around the copyright law that protects WotC's publications? This is how they do it, right? Is that now all they have to say is they can reprint anything as long as they say where the book comes from. As long as they say where it comes from, they're covered. And I think that that's an interesting decision to go ahead and do that. Like, is 5e tools now considered a derivative product that's just mentioning all these other things? Like, that's, yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, so we'll see. Now they did also say explicitly that if you talk about kind of how you can use and where you can publish things, because that's always kind of what the licensing and the SRD kind of boil down to is if you're going to write a thing, you can write whatever you want, but it might depend on where you can publish it, right? Certain things can only go to DM's Guild, for example, right? They are very explicitly saying that anything that has to do with the Forgotten Realms has to go to DM's Guild. And I'm not sure that I know that they were very keen on like brand identity, like Dragonlance had to go to the DM's Guild. I'm not sure that they specifically ever said Forgotten Realms did, and that's a new thing. And maybe they did, and I just missed it. But Forgotten Realms was just kind of so ubiquitous that it didn't really that one didn't really stick. But they are specifically saying that anything that is Forgotten Realms based has to go to DM's Guild, and that's the only kind of setting that they are calling out specifically, mostly because that's the only setting that exists for the new version of 5th edition. So yeah.
Interesting that they didn't put Greyhawk or Eberron there.
Yeah.
Eberron I almost get, because I know there have been tensions at times with Keith Baker.
Sure.
So I am confident, and we know that they've had tensions with Hickman and Weiss over the years. So it makes sense that they would be very specific about those two. But interesting that they didn't mention some of the others.
The only one that they mention here is Forgotten Realms.
Yeah. So, does that mean you can do Spelljammer? But obviously you still can't use their IP characters. So, who knows? There are still questions, and none of us here on this podcast are lawyers. We are not copyright lawyers. Yeah. Though I did meet a fantastic copyright lawyer who attended a couple panels with me on these very topic types at a Catacon last year. So look forward to seeing him again next year or later this year as well, because I really interested in his take on that. But very good topic, and we're not legal professionals. Seek legal professionals for the answers to legal questions.
Right, exactly.
But hopefully we can be part of giving you the questions you want to ask.
Well, and all the links for all of the stuff that we're talking about tonight are going to be down in the show notes. So if you have questions, you can go directly to the horse's mouth and see it there. So. All right. Well, speaking of other WotC news, Michael, you are going to be up. Apparently there was some thing that changed over, within the last couple of weeks over at WotC.
Yeah. So there was announced that both Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford would be stepping down from Dungeons & Dragons. And these two folks, among many others, but those two I think of are at least the top 3 or 4 that have shepherded D&D since like 3.5.
Yeah.
Into 4th edition, into 5th edition. Mike Merles was a big part of that early in 5th edition. There's a whole bunch of things with him. He left. But I'm curious. I have 2 avenues of thought. One, what do we think this means for the rest of 5th edition and up into including, because eventually there will be a 6th edition. They may not call it that, but it'll happen at some point. It may be 20 years down the road, but eventually they're going to redo it, right? Mm-hmm. And then separately, but in some ways connected, if this ends up being a misstep, which I've seen some speculation online that without those 2 people and Hasbro kind of stepping on their own, dick about this. If this really does mess up the dominance that Wizards of the Coast has had for a while with D&D, what do we think is the heir apparent? What system or game currently out there do we think could monopolize on these missteps? And if not, take the same market share increase theirs significantly. I think Pathfinder is kind of the easy answer.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it is the answer. So either of those topics you want to jump into, I'm interested on your takes.
That's
you go first because I got thoughts aplenty.
All right, I'm going to take this one first. And Michael, I think that those are really interesting questions for one. I think that I'm going to start with your first question, obviously, the one like, what does Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins leaving do for 5e? And I think that the question kind of like the nougaty core at the center of that bonbon is, why did they leave in the first place? Now they're saying all the right things. They're saying we chose to retire. We're going out on our own terms. I'm a skeptical dude when it comes to coincidental timing, especially involving any sort of corporate machinations, right? So I think that it is too coincidental that they both left right around the time that there were major layoffs in some of the major creative staff with WotC. And so were they maybe just at a level where it was like, we're laying off all these people. We're going to give you guys the option of leaving on your own terms after the release of the core 2025 books and after the release of the SRD. But then after that, you guys got to go, kind of thing, which is probably a horrible decision, let's be honest, for WotC, right? And I think that what it means for 5e is really going to depend on who kind of picks up the mantle and who goes from there. Are we going to see voices like Mackenzie Darmus, who has been working a lot on some of the later books in the 5e scheme? Are we going to see some of those other voices take up, kind of step up and take a bigger role in piloting the ship and everything like that? One thing that I hope they don't do is bring in some kind of like a hardliner who tries to go ahead and bring some of the people who have left WotC because of some of the social issues that they see with 5th edition. I hope they don't bring in somebody who is committed to reversing those or kind of attacking those policies. I think that would be a mistake, not only in 2025, but I think that it would be a mistake for 5th edition D&D. But I in the political climate that we're in right now, who the hell knows? Like, if they're going to go ahead and do that. But that is totally something that unfortunately is in play as a possibility. So that's kind of what I think what it means for 5th edition. We're not going to know really until we see who kind of steps up. And so who knows? But it could, hopefully it will continue to go in a really good direction from where 5th edition has been going. And in the back of my head, I'm kind of like watching over my shoulder to make sure it doesn't go in a bad direction. Right.
I mean, because there are legitimate concerns with 5th edition and even the new 2024. It is not a perfect game by any stretch of the imagination. And the people who have criticisms still have the same criticisms. It doesn't really have a strong identity. It doesn't know what it wants to do. It tries to do everything, but it doesn't really do anything well other than D&D. Like it does its own thing pretty well, but nothing else that well.
Yeah.
But you cannot argue with the success.
Right.
5th edition is by far the most successful version of D&D ever. Now, there are other factors like Stranger Things and Critical Role that have helped elevate the global zeitgeist of the consciousness, that it's just more people are playing games more than ever, and they seem to gravitate to D&D first. And so, all rising tide raises all ships type of thing. But those two gentlemen were very influential for that, and leveraging it and kind of like realize, like reading the tea leaves, like, oh, we need to partner up as best we can because we see what's happening here. And I just wonder what their leaving is going to mean. And one thing I'll say, I'll let Lee and Nick wants to jump in, is, the way in these larger companies things work, even though they're leaving now, the Crawford and Perkins fingerprints are going to be on like the next 8 books anyways. Like those have already been in development, outlines, things have been in work for a while. So it's not like the next book is going to be hard line. They weren't a part of it. Even if they don't get credit now, their influence will still be felt for the next several books, maybe not 8, but they're definitely the next few books, probably the rest of this year.
For sure.
Anything that comes out is still going to be their babies in a way. Leonika, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, at the very least, they are the designers of the 2024 game. So their name's going to be on every book that comes out in the 2024 game as the primary designers. Maybe not individual titles down the road, maybe not individual adventure paths or whatever, but they're on the title card. So we're good for several years with them being a part of this game at a minimum. I think that very similar to Josh, I won't rehash his comments. that we're never going to know in the immediate the true reasons why. The optimist in me wants to absolutely and fundamentally believe, specifically with Chris Perkins, that he's good. He's been in this industry longer than God knows anybody, certainly anybody at that level. And if he said, my work is done here, if that's honestly him saying it, more power to you, Mr. Perkins. Thank you very much for everything you've done for me personally and this hobby. At a time when I didn't have enough funds to go on crazy vacations, go to wonderful places, travel the 3 or 4 hours to hang out with Josh personally, or hang out with any of my other friends that I went to college with or hung out with in the years that followed college, because I was able to put together enough scratch over a couple months to buy a physical book, or I could go without a couple extra bottles of Mountain Dew in a month to buy a digital book. And it allowed me to chill with my buddies, 5 or 6 hours a month online, where we spend almost as much time after the show's over or after the game is over, kibitzing, talking, catching up on kids, finding out what's going on, who's doing what for work, as anything. I have that because 5th edition was popular, because 5th edition brought people back to the gaming table that had left years ago. I still gamed all the way along locally and with local friends and whatnot, but there's a bunch of my friends that I'm gaming with now that didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And, Mr. Perkins, thanks for giving that back to me. I appreciate you. I really, really do. We've never met. I don't go to the gigantocons that you would normally be at. I've not had the opportunity to see you run your big events, but I know what you've done has live and in person, which is reported to be difficult for him. It was not something he truly enjoyed personally, but he did it because it was the right thing to do for the brand and for the game. I really appreciate that sacrifice. We talk on this show a lot about challenges and imposter syndrome and fighting through some of those difficulties. The three of us separately outside of podcasting have shared conversations about that. And so I absolutely get it. Like, I get big nerves about conventions, but I love going there. The energy when I'm at that table is unparalleled. The nerves right before that first die drops, whoo, I absolutely get it. And when I hear that Chris Perkins felt that, I'm like, well, maybe I'm not so bad. Yep. Maybe I'm not so bad. And that fills me with hope. So I think on that level alone, I hope that what we hear is true. They are just saying it's their time. With Jeremy Crawford, I know a lot less about his specific experiences. I just happen to know more about Chris Perkins, and that might be the news cycle and other content creators who do know Chris Perkins or who have met him have had more time to talk about their experiences with him. I know that Jeremy Crawford has answered a couple of my questions over the years, and I've always found his answers to be thoughtful, to the point, and right on the spot. I get the feeling that these are the kinds of people I would enjoy spending time with, and I think that's what they bring to the brand. When you ask about who's stepping up, I absolutely hope it's Mackenzie DeArmas, who had a lot of heavy lifting on the Monster Manual and a couple other books for the Core 24. And I did hear her name being spoken about as one of the folks who's going to be shepherding a lot. Yeah. I keep hearing that there are other people, but I've not heard a lot of names involved specifically at this stage. So it remains to be seen. But the other thing, like Josh, I appreciate old school gaming, and I like that. I like it a lot. I just hope it is not a return to that for the wrong reasons. There's nothing wrong with OSR games. I actually love them. Mm-hmm. I am very careful about the tables I pick for them. Yep. And that I hope that level of caution is engaged with by WotC going forward. Yep. Josh, you were going to answer the second part of that question.
I think what will be telling, and I fully speculate that both Crawford and Perkins will probably have non-compete clauses in their contracts. where do they go? Or do they start their own companies? Do they join someone else? Or they're probably going to wait like a year or two, probably have to wait a year or two.
Yeah.
But I think where they end up will actually tell us a lot about how and why they left.
Yeah, that's very, very fair, because I think that I think you're right that Pathfinder is kind of like the easy answer, but I also don't think that it's the right one. And I'm also not sure that it's I think that's it's Pathfinder, because I mean, everything that gets cast off of D&D becomes Pathfinder, right? I think that it would be very intriguing to go ahead and see if they join a company like Kobold or a company like Darrington or something like that that's kind of producing like these D&D like games, something like that. But I will say, I think the easy money for me is on that Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins are going to be sitting in their basement writing a game for the next 2 years until they announce their own game company in 2 years. When they're not, because I think you've got to be like, they must have a non-compete. They have to. They have to. Wizards of the Coast would not have been that dumb not to. Like, let's be honest. Like, you can't let Jeremy Crawford leave and not give him a non-compete clause. So, which honestly might be part of why he didn't get laid off. Because a lot of times, if you get laid off, non-competes go away. So they had to let him leave on his own terms. See, that's so.
Yeah. I am excited to see. Have to ask that. I was going to pardon me. I would have to ask that question of like somebody like the Legal Eagle podcast or something like that to find out. But I think that is a state by state issue. And if WotC is headquartered in Washington State, I would imagine their non-competes are very different than the ones that exist in Rhode Island.
Sure.
Where Hasbro is centered. So, are they employees of Hasbro and have their non-complete legal issues, or are they employees of WotC and have their non-compete issues, or are they so wholly owned that it automatically becomes that when companies take over each other, the non-complete issue contract you sign for one sometimes transfers, sometimes doesn't, and that's all interlegal. A lawyer needs to answer that question. Again, we are not legal professionals, and we don't even know that this is specifically an issue. But
speculation.
Mike Merles has said a lot of things in the last couple of years that he wasn't saying in the first couple of years.
Yep.
So
probably. But I do think I think it will be interesting. I actually would love for there to be like a Perkins Crawford game company. And I don't know, they may hate each other. I don't know. They work together. That doesn't mean they like each other. Yeah. But I am so curious what they would have wanted 5e to be without Hasbro's influence. Mm-hmm. And they now have a chance to show us when the 2 years is up or whatever the case may be. So I'm intrigued. But my follow-up, again, the segment's already gone longer than I expected. Who do you think, what game do you think is either the one that best positioned or what you hope? Who would you like to see gain some prominence in this time of, confusion?
I think so. While and I think I'm going to break Luanika's heart a little bit, and I'm probably going to break Jim Johnson and Mike Dismuke's heart also. While I would love to say that it would be Modifius and STA that is poised to go ahead and make a big move in that. I think the easy money on this one is on Free League. I think that they are putting out some of the best RPGs on the market right now, and I think that their kind of stress dice mechanic is so engaging, and it is so much. It's kind of like it's like Powered by the Apocalypse games, but it's more mechanical than Powered by the Apocalypse games. And I think that fills a really interesting niche from people that like PBTA but want more crunch. I think that Free League games kind of really, really kind of scratch that itch very, very well. And so I'd be willing to bet that they're the ones that would have the most to gain from something like this.
Okay. I like that answer for a couple of reasons, but it wouldn't be my answer. So I think Free League is exceptionally well positioned to gain a lot if, for any reason, D&D falters. Despite a lot of the doomsayers and the YouTubers with flame and brimstone in their title cards that claim, oh, this is the end, this is the final step, this is the whatever. I'm thinking of a podcaster somewhere that I won't mention by name because I really don't want to get in a flame war. That individual has thousands of subscribers for stuff I don't particularly care for. I'll be very diplomatic at this point. But what I will say about this is I think that Free League is well positioned because of a couple financial factors that a lot of game companies don't have. Free League, as I understand it from what I've read and what I've heard through other podcasters with whom I do have confidence and trust in, they operate their home country where they're headquartered provides grants, artistic grants, things like that. So one of the reasons why they're able to produce such fantastic handouts and really well done graphic things to go with their books and still have it be at a US affordable price point is because they are at some point subsidized by those artistic grants.
I think anybody has ever made a secret about that. Yeah, I'd like.
Yeah, and I think that is all there. I think the content was great no matter what. Those grants help the production value.
Absolutely,
they don't change the content, and so I think they already have the content. They have that benefit on the production value, which is very helpful. That said, when I go to conventions, I have consistently seen one or two Alien games. I have consistently seen, I'm usually the only person running a Modiphius game. The last convention I went to, there was one other one being run. It was being run in a weird way, meshed with something else, but there was at least two Modiphius games. When I go to bigger conventions, there's some Shadow Dark, there is Pathfinder, there's these other things, but I don't see anybody other than Pathfinder with a lot of games. What surprises me is I also don't see a lot of Tales of the Valiant gaming specifically, one or two here or there, but I don't see a lot of it, which surprises me because I feel that their product is in many ways superior to 2024. And they certainly have the material to be able to run. They're right up there with Modiphius with the amount of published adventure paths that are short form, good for conventions, pre-gens, all of that stuff that WotC isn't going to get to for this game until later this year and into next year. So I they just now released the SRD. No one's going to be able to produce adventures for them either immediately, unless they already had it done. They knew what was coming. They had the heads up, and now they can drop it or whatever. But we're 4 or 5 months from a lot of 5.5 stuff being ready to go. And it surprises me that there are these other things there. So when you ask the question, who's going to be the heir apparent? I'm going to give you an answer that may surprise you. I don't think there's going to be an heir apparent. I think WotC will still be at the top. I don't think there's anybody taking them out. They will take hits, but the whole industry is about to take a hit. So who does better if everybody gets knocked down several percentage points? Who does better, the ones at the top or the ones at the bottom or the ones in the middle? The answer is the ones at the top still stay at the top. If we end up losing some at the bottom, the one at the top still seems like they're the only one in the game. And so I don't think there is or will be an heir apparent, at least not in the next few years, because I don't see anything that's happening. I don't see this change being any different than when Gary Gygax left TSR. They suffered, but they still came out on top. The game of D&D came out on top. They hit a huge amount of fight and complication when they were fighting Palladium and White Wolf, and there was one other big system, Traveler and GURPS with Steve Jackson in the early 90s. But guess what? They came out with a new edition to bring a few people back. They came out with their 2.5 skills and powers option, much maligned, even though I thought it was a fantastic game addition to second edition. And when they came out with 3.5, I know the game group I was in, we went into that gangbusters because it was a great game for the time. It's not the game I want to play now, mind you, but at the time it was hot as hot. And I think that that's largely what we're going to see this time around. Yeah. They will take hits, but they're going to keep coming back because
it's D&D.
I know a lot of
It's
people.
D&D.
I know a lot of people hate it, but you cannot overestimate the brand that D&D has. The brand recognition that it brings to the market. I mean, again, D&D is synonymous with RPGs. It's love it or not, it's true. It's like Kleenex and Xerox for many people. D&D is RPGs, and then it's like, oh wait, there are other brands of D&D. Like that's just what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
For me personally, I would love to see 13th Age get a huge growth, because I think 13th Age is the game that most people who play D&D think they're playing. Yeah. It is still D&D, it's still D20s, higher numbers are better, but it has those story game elements blended in. They're not just tacked on, they're blended in, but it's still D&D. You know, it's basically it's a clone of D&D, but I actually think it incorporates the story game stuff that people who watch Critical Role and Dimension 20 strive for better than D&D does. And I've said this before, if the podcast, the RPG Academy, had not launched at the same exact time that D&D Next and then 5e came out, 13th Age would be the game that I play all the time. Like I just kind of married my ship. I love D&D. Don't get me wrong. I love the game. But I actually think 13th Age is a better version of D&D.
Yeah.
So anyway, that went way longer than I was anticipating. My apologies.
Love it. Hey, that was a great discussion. Yeah. So, all right, Mr. Miller, what do you got tonight?
So I have the unfortunate task of bringing to bear the conversation that I kind of alluded to in my last rant. When I say that the whole industry is getting ready to take some hits, and that's really the situation that has been on everybody's mind here in the States and probably everywhere else because of how it impacts them in various ways. I know our dear friends in Canada are feeling it. I speak with a couple fellow Star Trek gamers on a regular basis who reside in Canada, and we've been talking about this stuff for a while, but tariffs and how that is going to impact the gaming industry. And as I get into this, very similar to what I've said earlier tonight, we're not lawyers. We are not tariff professionals. I am an amateur business radio podcast viewer, watcher, reader who has spent a lot of time in this issue, largely because of how it impacts Tabletop Journeys and our publications, in addition to the industry as a whole. So I have really dug deep over the last few months following this issue to the best of my ability. So I think I have a pretty good handle on it and specifically how it impacts gaming. So my goal tonight is to really not get into all of it, but keep everything as laser focused as possible on what the impacts are to the gaming industry. Preamble over.
Tariffs bad.
Tariffs bad.
Tariffs bad?
Yeah. Free trade, good.
It's a little more complex, but that's the heart of it.
I mean, it boils down to a little bit of that. And look, again, trying to stay out of the politics of it, I'm just going to talk about what the impact to us in the gaming industry is. If you have feelings about it or you want to chat about it, we have a Discord. We can talk about things. We're going to keep it as apolitical as possible. But if you have questions about how things impact the gaming industry, let us know. We'll talk to you about that. But we're not going to be getting into the politics.
Sorry, hold on one sec.
Yeah, there was like an angel just left Josh's body and flew up his wall.
Yeah, I did see that.
Your soul just left your body. So what I'll say, Leonika, to that, again, avoiding the politics, is that as a small business owner myself for Catacon, the thing that I can't stand is uncertainty. If my prices change and I'm told that, I can then adjust. I can make decisions. I can go, okay, I have to adjust my prices, or I just can't do this anymore. The problem with the current situation we're in is the uncertainty that the tariffs change. They rescinded. They go back, they go up, they go down. There is no way to plan a business when you have no certainty of what your costs are going to be literally day to day.
Yep. And you are absolutely correct. And that is actually the That is the subtext, the major text, and the entire point of the Rascal News article. For those of you who've been with the show for a while, a little over a year ago, we did an interview with Lynn Kodega at Rascal News about other things at the time, OGL, oddly, and a few other things that were going on, the beginning of Rascal News. But Chase Carter at Rascal had an article that came out April 4th. Links will be in the description, where Chase has talked with a lot of industry professionals, talked about the issues. Some of the things that Michael was talking about is really the problem. Are they here? Are they gone? Is it up? Is it down? That's not unique to our industry, but it is very specific for our industry, very specific to convention promoters. Michael, you were booking your time and locking in prices and locking in costs and in some cases putting down deposits a year in advance.
Mm-hmm.
If your costs, for whatever reason, and maybe tariffs impact that, maybe they don't, who actually knows at this stage? But if your costs go up 154%, that could be, and not just you, but with any industry, 154% could be make or break.
I'm out of business. 100%.
Yeah.
For me, that would be a Catacon ends or it's on hiatus for a couple of years. We could not handle that fluctuation.
Yeah. I can say that most industries I've ever worked in or dealt with do not deal with profit margins of 154%. Once you get done paying for the item, the labor, the lights, the building, the services, the fees, the taxes, once you get done with all of that and insurances, there are very few businesses that are posting 154% profit that they can tackle. That means things don't get done. That's the reality of the industry we're in. Now, there's a lot within this article and within other articles. The folks over at Ghostfire Games and their podcast, the episode in question aired on April 9th. So we are talking a couple weeks ago for the specific ones I want to call people's attention to. And I do that on purpose. Both things have probably done updates since then. I know Ghostfire has done some updates, but the episode in specific that I list in the show notes here, they did a whole portion of the show on it. So there's a timestamp that's listed 23 minutes, 15 seconds in, if you want to just look at the tariff versus TTRPG stuff. So it's a good amount of time with their guests. It's Ben Byrne, it's James Hake, who's also been on our show. It's Sean Merwin, who I actually chat with on occasion and has taken, and Teo Sabadia, who was on the show on this particular episode, both of them, who have taken great pains to get my name, say my name correctly when they say my name on their show. So, kudos to the team over there at Mastering Dungeons and Ghostfire Games. Look, they did a great piece on that, and there's a lot of good conversation about why it's bad for the gaming industry. And look, there are going to be people out there talking to you about how it's not that bad and it's not that terrible, but it all comes down to indecision. Mm-hmm. We don't know what's going to count. If you're just printing a book, maybe you're not impacted,
right? Because
books are supposed to be free of this. However, the challenge then becomes, what if the tariff collector at the dock, the customs person, thinks your book is a game?
Right. There's right now there are items in customs that are in this limbo because the people who are supposed to be charging the tariffs don't always know what they should or shouldn't do. And, it's extra loops or hoops people have to jump through.
And, lost time is
lost money,
and lost money equals higher costs.
Yep.
So, that level of indecision. And if you are one of these folks who's doing a Kickstarter or in the middle of that Kickstarter, or worse yet, have already funded, already produced, and now you're bringing it over stateside, I was listening to a report coming back to the home office just before we went to air, where a customs official in Lake Erie, Pennsylvania on Marketplace was actually talking about the fact that they are actually having, with some items, not game related specifically, but determine the percentage of a given item in a product, because different parts of this total package are actually tariffed at different rates. So knowing that you have 10% of the thing that's at 154%, and you have 8% of the thing that is at 10%, and you have 50% of the thing that's at 25%, getting that mix by line item is what they're trying to figure out.
And I think that's one of the things about
terrible for games,
about TTRPGs and gaming in general that does make it more complex. Is one, the vast majority of people are publishing in China, and again, without getting into the politics of it, would I want more things made in America? Absolutely, I would. Are we 3 to 4 years away from having any sort of infrastructure to do that? At least. So it's just not reasonable to expect that. But then you have games that there are books, there are dice. There are dice tower elements. There are plastic elements. There's doodads. There's cards. There's so many different elements that go into like a box that, to your point, what is this? So it becomes, again, the uncertainty principle of, can I absorb a 20% tariff? Probably not. It's going to be very difficult. But can I absorb what could be a 20% tariff or could be a 50% tariff? Maybe this bundle of games is tariffed at this percentage, and then the next shipment that comes in 3 weeks later is a completely different one. That uncertainty is the death knell for some of these smaller companies. And the last thing I'll say again before let you jump in is, you mentioned, the profit margins. Most of these smaller, mid to small level publishers, their profit just funds the next project. So even if they do make 30% profit, 25% of that goes to the next product. They don't have a next product now, so they're dead. Even if they make 30% on what they have, they can't fund the next thing, so they will entropy and die.
We just got an email. We just got an email a couple days ago from, I'm not sure that this is public information, so I don't want to say who, but it's a campaign that I backed. It is somebody that has been on the show multiple times. He's a real great guy. He's a fantastic publisher. And his books are currently sitting offshore, and he has a tariff bill that is eating all of the profit that they made on their Kickstarter. All of it. It's all gone. And that's exactly what he said. He's like, this means now that I don't get paid, which that's fine. I can live with that. But we also have no capital to go ahead and run the next thing. We just don't. Like that's now
that
gone.
particular email. And if and when he sees a show, and if you felt comfortable saying something about it and speaking to it, please do. But we're not going to call that out publicly at this point, unless that's something you would like us to do. He also said he was very glad that they had made the decision to make sure every individual other than himself was paid beforehand.
Yes. Yep.
So
that's very clear.
All employees, all their freelancers, all their artists, everybody got paid along the way. So at this point, it is just the profits that got eaten up. And when I say just, that sounds like, at least we're okay. That's a terrible thing. He has put years of his life and his energy and his efforts into this thing. I'm eagerly awaiting it, and can't wait till it's here. I will proudly celebrate it when it gets here. Yep. Can't wait for it, to be honest with you. Yeah. But it's a shame that much effort and all the things that they've had to do to get to this point is on a daily whim and hoping the guy at the dock makes a nice decision on their behalf.
Yeah.
That's bullcrap.
So there's an article that's going to be in the show notes that I wanted to go ahead and make sure that we included. And I want to be very kind of clear up front that when I read the article, I had a lot of problems with the angle that the author was taking in terms of his attacks towards other people and why they were having such a problem with the tariffs and everything like that, and his personal bias. And the reason for that is because until you read the entirety of the article and get to the very end, you don't realize that the individual that wrote the article has a book that is designed to help people run their own publishing company. And he thinks he has all the answers, and therefore everybody who is suffering right now is doing it incorrectly. I think that that's a pretty big bias that he should have disclosed at the beginning of the article. And maybe it was just because, maybe I'm on his. I guess in all fairness, it is on his website that this article appeared. So I think that bias should have been more clearly stated. But also, the entire tone of the article is pretty pointed. It's pretty insulting. That being said, I do think that he rakes some very interesting points about the fact that publishers now need to be very, very careful about how their distributors are categorizing and coding the stuff that they're getting, because it can mean the difference between 154% tariff and an 8% tariff. He took really keen umbrage with Gloomhaven and with the company that makes Gloomhaven, that just basically came out like within the last couple of weeks, saying that Gloomhaven 2 and Frosthaven, which have already been kickstarted, have already been funded, have already been printed, are basically not going to be distributed to anybody here in the US because of a monstrous like $3 million tariff bill. And I think that he takes a lot of umbrage with that. I would if you can see through the bias and kind of the vitriol that he's throwing at them, I think he raises a very, very interesting point about why that particular publisher may be doing that, and what that says about kind of how that publisher has proceeded with things. But yeah, like the whole bit about the fact that like the profits from one game fund the next game, I don't think that that's a secret, but it seems like people are like, I can't, like there's a lot of pearl clutching going on with that people are like, I can't believe that people do that. It's like, well, no, that's how TTRPGs have survived. That's why we can go ahead and do all these things, is that, we throw out a game to go ahead and pay for the shipping on another game, or something like that. Like that's what we do.
Or at least the advertising to set up the next Kickstarter.
Oh, absolutely. Right. I mean, the margins are so shoestring. And I think that's because people really don't understand that. Like, Michael, I'm not sure if you dealt with this with the RPG Academy Kickstarters, but I know with our Kickstarters, our marketing budget is 25% of the money that we make, period. Like, because if we don't market at that level, we don't get attention. Mm-hmm. Like, period. Yep. Like that is 25% off the top. If it costs us another 40% to make the game, now we're talking, we've only got 30% left over. And if we're paying 154% tariffs, right, it's really easy to go ahead and see what happens there.
I mean, I think again, it's very muddy. There's a lot of gravy, but part of the reason why TTRPGs in this gaming industry has flourished is because there was a pretty low barrier to entry. Yeah. If you had an idea and you went to Kickstarter, your idea could come to fruition. And to the point of the person who wrote that article, it was okay if I wasn't an expert.
Right.
But now only people who are experts can navigate it. And that makes it less likely that your average person can make this work. And again, the larger companies like Stonemeyer, I think, announced this week they're joining a lawsuit about the tariffs.
Yeah.
They're one of the bigger publishers, but just like your little mom and pop, one or two people who work together, who try to do a thing, they may not have the expertise to navigate it and might just have to quit.
Yep.
And one thing
I think of the plethora of indie content creators that we have interviewed and had on our show, that you've had on the RPG Academy show and tell, that Mo has done and over the years. If you are one or two people or a team of 4 or 5 and you're putting together a book, and if you're not WotC, it is hard to go out into the marketplace and command a $50 book price. It's hard. It is hard, right? We all know that. I'm not WotC. I really want to be doing this at $25. Here's the challenge. Nobody's doing a hardcover book at $25. You can't. It's not an option. Mm-hmm. So you have to go out there and produce the absolute best you can, market to as many people as you can, run it at as many conventions as you can to make that just happen. Yeah. And this impacts that. And it's a tragedy that it happens. And you're right, that low barrier of entry, that's what I was mentioning at the earlier in the show. The fact that it was such a low barrier of entry, a little bit out of 2 paychecks, and I at least had something I could go and game and hang with my friends.
Right. So I think what we're going to see,
we are at the point that that's going to change.
Well, I think what we're going to see is a greater surge of PDF only and print and play. Those are going to be your ways around it.
Yep.
Everybody already has dice. So yeah, my game has cool dice, but you know what? You already have dice here. A 6 is a stick, and a 3 is an ice cream cone. Now you can play my game at home for whatever. So you're going to see a shift to that very quickly, because that is a way around it. That's not going to work for the games that are in production. But one thing I'm very curious about, and I'm worried about, is Gen Con, because Gen Con exists as an exhibitor focused convention. Yeah, there's all the RPGs, but that dealer hall is what allows Gen Con to exist. And exhibitors are not going to be able to have stock because they can't pay the tariffs, or again, all this uncertainty is going to cause problems. I'm really wondering what Gen Con is going to look like this year if this is not fixed. And I shouldn't say fixed. This is not clarified. Stabilized. Thank you. That's the word. Stabilized quickly. Because we're not that far from Gen Con. People have got to already have orders on boats before they're going to get here. Yeah. And I really think we're going to see a huge reduction in the number of exhibitors, which is going to have a cascading effect of Gen Con. Like last year, they sold out 70, 80,000 people were there. And as much money as that raises through badge prices, the reason Gen Con can do what it does is because they have thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in exhibitor fees that people are not going to be able to pay.
Yeah. Or won't pay if they can't even bring the game.
Well, yeah, they can't sell stuff because they don't have sell stuff, or they can't sell it at the price point they need to sell it to offset the cost. So I just think you're going to have way less exhibitors, which is going to, again, cascade over the entire thing. Yeah. Maybe not this year, but next year.
Yeah. What it does is it, like you said, it raises the barrier of entry, which limits the amount of people that are going to be able to go. The other impacts of these will impact other reasons to go to conventions, travel time, whatever, who can stay at hotels because their funds are being eaten up with other things, what have you. There are just so many cascading effects, and all of them impact our industry. At the end of the day, we are a post-necessity hobby. Yep. People are going to pay their rent, or they should.
Yep.
We're discounting my college years. Right? Yeah. They're going to pay their rent. They're going to eat their food. They're going to have heat. They're going to have hot water. They're going to have air conditioning, and probably a means of transport before they buy a game.
Yep.
What that could mean is there still may be a lot of gaming, but what it means is it'll be harder to produce 5 titles a year because people are only going to be able to afford 3.
Yep.
And that does not bode well for the industry. One last thing I want to do before I close us out on this topic is Backer Kit sent out some information to a lot of folks like Tabletop Journeys who do things, and just people who backed other things, which is a tariff profiles and physical product tariff assistance thing. And it is something you have to opt into, but effectively what this does is they are basically saying if you fill out basic information, they would be able to help you estimate what your tariff costs should be. Now, how they're doing it based on things that change daily, I couldn't tell you. I saw this and thought it was an interesting start to the discussion, not the result or end of the situation by any means.
Because they also they're very keen to point out that it's still in beta format.
They were very keen, because if things change daily, like last week when we had tariffs on at midnight, in question by 8 o'clock, off by 4 o'clock, and then part of them back on by midnight the following night, there's no way any platform handles that. No platform can. So, but one of the things I found was interesting with that is if this beta works well and goes to full market, the idea is that you can estimate what you expect based on what you know when what the tariffs would be based on the profile information you put in at the time your crowdfund closes. During that fulfillment process, as things change, and at that time, you decide how much it takes the tariff and allows it to be a separate line item in the cost, so your customer sees that. And then you, as the content creator, the crowdfunder, can then say, hey, I am willing to take 50% of that tariff line. I am willing to take 30% of that tariff line, but I do have to pass on 70 or whatever the case may be. So you actually set that line. and what they're saying it will allow you to do. And again, I reiterate, I do not know if this works. I just know it's in beta, and I thought it was an interesting thing that I wanted to bring to the conversation. It allows you to, as it adjusts at the end when things are fulfilling, if the tariffs were lower than what you estimated, you can refund that to your backers. If the tariffs go higher during the process, because it's set by a line, tariffs raised during the process, you're setting the bar. So at the point of close, that means that cost is going to fluctuate for the backer. Which means some backers are going to back out. That's just a reality, which is a bad thing. But if you're in a situation where I don't want to lose my shirt, you're still in that fulfillment phase based on something you backed before all of this tariff nonsense, that may be the only way you can make it through this particular project. So I get why something like that might be a useful tool. But what I will say to the buyers out there, because I back a lot of things, Josh backs a lot of things, Michael, I'm sure you back a lot of things. We've all talked about how we've had to hold ourselves down and not back something that we really wanted.
I've done some really stupid things on Kickstarter.
I'm telling you. I can't wait to show it to y'all, but I backed the Port Haven thing last month, so I'm just telling you, crazy.
I thought about that an awful lot.
I know you did. I know you did. But what I can tell you as a purchaser is what it really comes down to is caveat emptor, buyer beware. You're going to have to know who you're buying from and whether or not you trust them. The reason why I felt okay, given all of this turmoil, to go with Port Haven is I have a good friend, Benito, from Streams of Sphero fame and our Alanis games for many years, who has backed this company multiple times, and he feels very confident that they will honor their word. So based on the strength of that word of mouth from that close friend, I felt comfortable backing this despite the turmoil. It's going to cause people to make the decision, do I trust that they're going to follow through? Will there be delays? Maybe. Will there be yips and hips throughout the process? Maybe. But at the end of the day, are they going to deliver? And if that's a yes, then I say don't change your habits if it's something you can reasonably afford without breaking your life.
Yep.
Because that's the only way this gaming industry gets through. You got to trust who you're going with. We're all going to be narrowing our circle when it comes to these things. Yeah. That's a shame, because that means discovery is going to be harder. There are good folks out there doing good games that are not going to be discovered or not going to back at the levels that they would like, simply because that
I just had a funny thought. So again, I just got off that cruise, and if anyone's ever been on a cruise, once you're on international waters, basically, like, you can buy things duty free, and it's usually like Rolexes, diamond rings, and liquor. Next year, it's going to be board games. You're going to have duty-free sales on the promenade
on the
Frost Haven. That's right.
Yeah.
Buy it duty-free.
I think that
if I get tagged in Florida because I bought Monopoly, I'm going to throw a fit.
Yeah. I think that the Port Haven Kickstarter is going to be a very interesting one to go ahead and see how tariffs affect it, because one of the big benefits of the Port Haven one was the boat, right? You get the 3-tier galleon, right? And I think that it can be argued that the boat, as you get it in the Kickstarter, is a game piece, right? But once it's painted, is because one of the things that they offered was the ability to go get it painted, right? Once it's painted, is it now a piece of art? And
that's a great question, and we'll have that answer because Benito backed it, and he got the ghost ship.
Well, he got the ghost ship. So the ghost ship is printed in clear resin. So that is still a game piece. Yeah,
I bought the painted one, so we'll actually be able to compare to see if there's any differences on our end.
Fucking idiot. Anyway,
that's our one. I mean, I absolutely debated buying the unpainted.
Yeah.
And then I said, I'm going to have like 200 other figs in this thing or whatever.
Exactly.
195 other figs. And I'm like, that's more painting than I'm going to want to do.
Yeah.
I'm never going to paint them all. Yeah. And so at least I'll have the painted boat.
See, you just need to make the commitment that I have made that I'm not going to buy any more figs until I have painted 100 figs this year. You know,
all I'm going to say to you, Josh, is between the two of us, who do you think has the stronger willpower?
I mean, me.
And then now you know why I'm not making that promise.
Yeah, fair.
I don't break promises to myself.
Yeah.
I just choose not to make them. If I'm going to go wild and out, I'm going to go wild and out.
I don't know. You and I have broken several Jägermeister bets in our days.
But not promises to myself. On that note, let's move along.
All right, everybody. That's our show for I know that the show ran super duper long, but this is a ton of really important stuff that's happening here in the industry right now. I'm glad that we took the opportunity to go ahead and talk about it. As always, I really value your insights, gentlemen. That was some really interesting stuff in there that looking at this in ways that I really hadn't thought about. So appreciate your time. Hope everybody out there listening enjoyed the show. Please, if you did enjoy the show, make sure that you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you get notified every single time one of the many shows that are now coming out on the Tabletop Journeys channel come about. And if you would like to support the show even more, you can go check us out at Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/TTJourneys. One of the big benefits there is that you get to go ahead and roll your dice with us from time to time. If you like Star Trek, if you like D&D, if you like potentially Savage Worlds, some working on that. There may be some things coming up here in the next couple months to go ahead and get your opportunity to get your game on. So,
yep. And by all means, if you have questions on any of these topics specifically or any topic in general, concerns, let us know. Comment in YouTube. We'll get to those answers. With all the shows we have, it's easy for us to say, hey, we got this from a recent show on the channel. We wanted to address it. Let us know. Talk to us. Because this impacts everybody in a different way. We are content creators. We are gamers. We are purchasers ourselves individually. But we are very interested in your experiences and how this is impacting what you go to do and your choices. We've got three of us, how it's going to impact our crowdfunding purchases and upcoming game purchases. We're interested in how that's going to impact everybody else's. And maybe we revisit this in a month or two to see kind of where we are at and has this stabilized.
Yeah. Or hasn't not. So. Yeah. Anyway. Thanks very much for listening, everybody. Appreciate it as always. That's our show for tonight. And we'll see you back next week. I think we've got our next Class Warfare starting next week, actually. I think Paladins comes out next week. So that'll be a good time. Mike Daniel again running Paladins this time. So that'll be that's a good show. So we will see.
You got to smite for your right.
That's right. To party.
Awesome. Good night, everybody.
That's a wrap.
Good night.